Hi everyone, this is Jeanette Milio. Welcome to Module 1 of the Advanced Film Finance course. A lot of what happens during this first week is going to be somewhat familiar because we're going to discuss finance sources and related terms and conditions, which you have learned about in the first course, Entertainment Finance, from the first dollar to profit distribution. So a lot of the financing sources and related terms and conditions will be familiar to you. What this module does, however, is dive deeper into the sectors, provide much more information in relation to these finance sources, so you have some more and a deeper understanding of what these finance sources entail. What I'm going to do with this module 1 summary is guide you through the essentials of this first week of this module 1, of the elements that I would like you to remember and that I would like you to focus on. So this is our summary of module 1, which is a recap of finance sources, terms and conditions of what you have learned in the first class and just diving deeper into it. So here's our overview page letting us know what we're going to talk about in this summary and in the first week. We'll talk about the fundamental aspects of the various finance sources and related terms and conditions in connection with those finance sources and how we will structure them to have an optimization of profits and to understand what our collateral is and to understand what the risk mitigation strategy should be and how we're going to combine the funding sources to optimize and maximize profitability. So the funding sources I'll focus on in this first week are senior loans, junior loans, and bridge loan structures and related collateral and terms and conditions. Then I'm going to give us some investment options for equity. And then I'm going to obviously talk about non-recoupable finance sources and terms and conditions, as well as some requirements, because we all know these are important to optimize profits. And we're going to start looking into some advanced finance structures, to see what options we can offer the equity to invest in different positions. So you should be able to, by the end of this week, differentiate between the various finance sources and modules, identify some profit components, employ revenue models, and employ a different finance structure for equity investors that gives them different options to optimize their ROI. The key activities for this week would be submitting quiz number 1 by Sunday, and also by Sunday submit a post on the discussion board. Introduce yourself, about yourself, where you're located, what do you do right now in the industry, if you are in the industry, maybe a fun fact about yourself, and what you're looking for in this course. So you can place this kind of note on the discussion board so everyone gets to know everyone, and it's a nice way to interact and network. Let's talk about loans. We all know what a senior loan is. It's a loan that can be provided by an entertainment bank, a media fund, or an investor. And the definition for a senior loan is a debt financing component that holds a priority position in the capital structure of a film project. What does that mean? It recoups in first position from the waterfall. As mentioned, we have banks, funders, media funds, lenders, and other investors who, specifically in this case, equity investors who do not wish to recoup in the equity pool, that would be interested in doing such an investment or such a loan. It is also something that we can combine with equity even the same equity investor could do this kind of financing and equity financing as well. And we're actually going to have an example this week of how that works. As mentioned, the waterfall position is the senior loan recoups in first position from all distribution revenues. In many cases, and you know this, they even recoup before the collection agent would recoup and before the sales agent would recoup. So sometimes they're really in first position. That does not mean that they would recoup before the P&A, print and advertising investments. Print and advertising investments are used to finance a marketing campaign for a film that is theatrically released. So that's a whole different situation, and we'll talk about that, of course, in this course. But that is the only thing that would not be included in this waterfall situation, where the senior loan would not recoup in front of box office revenues that are paid to P&A lenders. So the terms for the loan is usually between 12 and 36 months, and the costs are including interest and loan fees. Junior loans it's also a debt financing element that holds a second priority position behind the senior loan in the capital structure of a film. So when we have a senior loan and we have someone who gives us a junior loan, also referred to as a mezzanine loan, the senior loan recoups first, the junior loan recoups next. Providers for this junior loan are media funds and lenders and investors, particularly equity investors who do not want to be in the equity pool. It could be an investor that says, I want to invest, but there are too many equity investors already in the equity pool. I would like to recoup in front of them, and therefore I will give you a mezzanine investment, or junior loan as it also is called, instead. So this is going to be the junior loan recoupment waterfall position, is going to be the second position after the senior loan, but it's also second to the P&A, of course, the senior loan, of course, the sales agency fee, any guilt residuals we may have to pay because the distributor wasn't assigned, or we did not assign the residuals to the distributor. Those would be paid in front of the junior lender. Sales agent already said. Collection agent would be paid in front of the junior lender. So there are more than just a senior loan position in the waterfall that would be recouping before the junior loan. The collateral here would be the distribution revenues, the same collateral that we're looking at for the senior loan, but it is collateral that the senior loan has not taken and leaves on the table for the junior lender. Both lenders, the junior loan and the senior loan, have the film as a default lien to foreclose against. So the senior loan, if it's paid off and the junior loan is not paid off, they could foreclose on the film and would take it. And then the equity investor would not see their equity investment, because the junior lender would basically take the film and own it. You can think about the junior loan a little bit like your second mortgage if you want. So they do have a lien against the IP behind the senior loan, who also will file a lien against the IP. The costs of a junior loan are interests which are normally higher than what the senior lender would charge. They have loan fees. Sometimes they also charge executive producer fees and premiums and profit participation. Not all of this applies in all the loans, so there is some negotiation room, but I have seen some of these apply at the same time. The bridge loan is a loan, but it's a short-term loan. It's a short-term financing arrangement that helps us get through pre-production while we get our film ready to shoot, to go into production, and while the bond company, the insurance company that insures our film, is still going through all the documentation in order to release the insurance on the film to close the bond, if you want. And because most of our finance sources, which includes the senior and the junior loan, will not be released to us until the completion bond insurance has closed, we will likely potentially not have money for pre-production unless someone bridges this time frame for us and then would be paid once the completion bond insurance is issued and the film's closing has occurred. At that time, the bridge loan is going to be released and repaid to the bridge lender in addition to the interest. Now, the interest is going to be weekly because this is a short-term financing loan which is basically covering the production on a weekly basis. So let's say we have a loan that is given to us from a bridge lender. You could see the interest rates anywhere from 2 to 8% a week. I've seen all those ranges. They're not cheap. So we want to not use them for too long, but sometimes we need them for a week, up to 6 weeks sometimes 8 weeks. I've never actually used them for 8 weeks, but I've used one for 6 weeks. So we're going to have an example of how that works in the module this week. But this is what you're looking at. So you would basically paying, let's say if it's 3% per week and you need it for 5 weeks, you would pay them 15% as interest. So what they're looking at is they want to obviously have an insurance in case you cannot pay them back or cannot pay their fees. So they would also take a waterfall position. They would actually recoup behind the senior loan and before the junior loan, certainly before the equity. So they will be recouping in your waterfall any balance that was not paid to them, may it be a loan balance or maybe some fees, interest fees that you were not able to pay them because you weren't budgeted for those. So this is something to remember, that they will move into the waterfall in order to get paid. What they look at as collateral is, of course, distribution rights. So they want to make sure that there is enough in the collateral and distribution rights to pay them back. They understand that they're getting paid back after the senior loan. Sometimes if a junior lender is tricky, they might require for the bridge loan to recoup after them. I've not really seen that, but it could potentially be a situation, so I want to mention that. They do have a lien against the film in case the recoupment doesn't take place. So they would hold a lien against the film in third position. So the first lien would be for the senior loan, the second lien would be for the junior loan, the third lien would then be for the bridge loan. However, this is negotiable. It could very well be that the bridge lender requires to have a lien in second position and will not allow you to have the junior loan in front of them. So this is all negotiable. Anything with the junior loan and the bridge loan really is not set in stone. So there are negotiable things you can do. So you see here that the term in most cases is between 1 and 8 weeks. The term for the junior loan in very many cases is between 24 and 48 months. I put 72 months here because it could be longer. I've never had it more than 48 months, but I've heard other people had longer junior loans. And the term for the senior loan is usually between 12 and 24 months. I put 36 months here because sometimes if it's an investment company or a media fund or an investor, it could be allowed that it is longer. So these are kind of the ranges of the terms by which you have to, if you are a producer, pay these loans back. What are the costs for the bridge loan? As we mentioned, it's a weekly interest. They can also charge a loan fee and an executive fee. They could charge all of those three things, but they might charge just one or two of them. So what are the things that we need to look at in regards to application and risk mitigation when we look at senior loans and gap loans? So most banks and lenders who provide pre-sale and gap loans have certain requirements. They want bankable sales agents and bankable distributors. These are companies who they know, who have worked with the bank before, who have a track record with the bank in paying them on time, and who are therefore deemed bankable with the bank. They want bankable distribution agreements. Not every pre-sale agreement that you'll give to them may be acceptable to them. So they might look at a distribution agreement and say, well, we have no track record with this particular distributor here who you did a pre-sale with, so we can't really bank this deal either at all, or we will heavily discount it because there's no track record established with us being the bank. most of them will require a completion bond insurance. Completion bond insurance ensures the on-time production and on-budget production of a film or television show. Both works. So this is an insurance that lenders and banks very often require because they don't want to have a problem with the film not being finished or going over budget and then not being finished. So abandonment is a very big thing for very many lenders and investors. Now the pre-sale loans are subject to the creditworthiness of the sales agent. So it has to be bankable. The sales agent must be someone that they have done business with. It is subject to the creditworthiness of the distributor. And this would be valued in what they call a territory tier. So depending on where the distributor is located, in what country, maybe an economically challenged country or a country with a bad track record with this bank, the particular bank that we may be talking to. In that case, if the track record is a little spotty, the bank will lower the tier and make that a tier 2 territory or a tier 2 distributor where a higher discount would be applied. So they would maybe only pay 50% of the distribution license that is mentioned in the distribution agreement, in the pre-sale agreement. So tiering, tier 1 and tier 2, will tell you if and how the pre-sale deal that has been done, if and how it's banked with this bank. They will apply a tier to the territory as well as the distributor, and it's directly reflected in the level of credit worthiness. So the discounting would be applicable subject to these above findings, the credit worthiness and the valuation of the territory in the tier sector. The gap loans are subject to the credit worthiness of the sales agent as well. They're also subject to the bankability of the sales projections, also referred to as sales estimates, that are issued by the bank-approved sales agent. So they're looking at these sales projections, sales estimates, ultimates, all these words are used for that, very carefully and want to make sure that they are actually real. Now, how do they know they're real? They know they're real because they will also require bankable pre-sale distribution agreements supporting the sales agent's projections. So if the pre-sales are coming in and they're lower than the projected take number, the loan number, that tells the bank we need to lower the projections in their entirety. And then they reduce the entire sales estimate sheet and will give us a lower gap loan based on that. If the pre-sales come in and they are higher than the take, the bank will just leave the sales projections as they are. They will not increase them. They'll just leave them as they are. So the pre-sale distributions agreements are very important for us to understand how much gap can we get from the bank. So for the junior lender, the risk mitigation really is the creditworthiness of the sales agent, the tiering of the territory, the creditworthiness of the distributor, the sales estimates, and the supporting pre-sales. That is what the bank uses for risk mitigation. The junior lender does the same thing. They also look at the sales agent and distributors to make sure that they are bankable. They also look at the sales estimates and make sure that they are issued by a bankable sales agent, but also that there is enough available after the pre-sales were concluded, after the senior loan is being repaid, for the junior lender to be repaid. They're very keen on making sure that there is enough unsold rights available for them to recoup their loan, including all the costs in connection with the loan. The junior lender will also look at the pre-sales because they are very much of the opinion that they want to make sure the film finds a demand in the market. They want to obviously see that the pre-sales support the sales estimates, especially at the take level. But they're really looking at the pre-sales in support of the market demand because the junior lender is a little more driven by the performance of the film, simply because They don't have pre-sales, contractual, asset-backed lending components that they can use to mitigate their risk with. They are really just looking at the unsold territories, and the unsold territories are driven by the performance of the film. So this junior lender is very much looking at A, what is available, do I have sufficient collateral to cover my loan amount, and B, are the sales coming in, the pre-sales coming in at the numbers that were projected, because that's how they know if their collateral is really meaningful. Most junior lenders will require completion bond insurance like the senior lender as well, but there might be some that would not require completion bond insurance. So there are some companies like that. Now, junior loans are subject to higher costs. That means their interest rates compared to the senior loans are much higher. They also may require additional fees and premiums, and sometimes even profit participation, which is not the case with the senior loan. The senior loan will not take profit participation. Now, we do have a longer term here, so we have more time to pay this loan back, as I mentioned earlier, up to 72 months in some cases. This junior lender is taking a higher risk because their waterfall position is behind the senior loan, but also behind the sales agent and the collection agent, and potentially deferments and potentially residuals. So they have a lot of people in front of them recouping. So they look at that very closely. They look at the waterfall very, very, very carefully. So they are driven by the film's execution and performance, which is why they also look at the filmmakers. They will look at who is the director, who is the producer. Are these people experienced? And for us producers, in my case, I count myself in as producers as well as an investor, but in my producer role, I have to look at the validity of this junior loan because it is extremely expensive. It has additional charges, and sometimes it could even be more expensive than an equity loan. So in that case, I'd rather pay my equity investor 20% on the money as a premium than paying 15% per year to a junior lender for 3 years or 4 years. That gets expensive. We do also have the problem with this loan that we could lose our IP if we cannot pay them back. So if we get a junior loan and our film turns out to be just okay, but not really generating all the revenues we were hoping for, we could very much run into the risk of losing the film because this junior lender has the right to foreclose on the film. So when we're looking at the bridge lender and their risk, they are very much and very closely looking at the LOI, the letter of intent, which is issued by the completion bond company. And the reason for that is they're bridging the time between pre-production and completion bond closing. So they want to make sure that the completion bond actually closes. So the completion bond will issue a letter of intent to say, we're looking at this film, Jeanette has done everything right, everything is in line, but we just need to look at this and this and this and this and this agreement still, and these and these and these and these quotes to support the budget. And after we've done all that, then we will release the bond. And the bridge lender will look at these conditions and make sure that there's nothing in there that is potentially hairy, something that I as a producer could potentially not deliver on. And if that's the case, they would not give me the bridge loan. But if it's normal stuff that just has to do with the bond company, going through their due diligence, then the bridge lender is going to be comfortable in giving me a bridge loan. They will look at the production cash flow plan that is established by the line producer and is bonded by the completion bond company to make sure that there is enough money in the budget, and the cash flow plan will allow for the bridge loan to be paid back to them, including the interest charges that they will charge. They do want a bankable sales agent and distributors just as much as the junior lender and the senior lender. They do want bankable sales estimates because in the event that they have to go into the waterfall because we can't pay them from the budget, they will be recouping from those distribution revenues as well. So they want to make sure that there's sufficient collateral available to them after the senior loan has been paid, because that is who they would be recouping after. If there is a junior loan in front of them, they will be very keen on making sure that there is enough collateral even after the junior loan. And they may say, you know what, there isn't enough there for us to potentially get paid, so we were not doing the bridge loan. So that's a conversation that sometimes happens where the bridge lender does not see sufficient collateral in the waterfall position that one is trying to maybe shove him into. Many cases they are repaid from the budget on closing because this bridge lender is paying for budgeted line items that are generated and paid for during pre-production. So this is something that we're simply just having them advance for us because we cannot get our hands on our money yet. And so they have approval over the waterfall position, of course, because they want to make sure they get paid. So the bridge loans are subject to higher interest rates in comparison to a senior loan and a junior loan because they are weekly, they charge weekly rates. So that's something to think about. The shorter term is applicable here, so it's somewhere between 1 to 8 weeks as we talked about. It's definitely in comparison to the senior loan and the junior loan because they are much longer in their term. They have a higher risk given the waterfall position because they are behind the senior loan, so their risk is higher than the senior lender, and so therefore they are making very sure that there is not a large senior loan in front of them because otherwise it gets tricky for them, and they will make sure that the film is getting bonded. And there is a significant risk with that because if something happens during pre-production and we're not insured, there could be potentially the risk that the bond company is not going to insure the movie and the money will not be released to the movie and the movie will likely stop. Meanwhile, we have already spent the money the bridge lender gave us and then they're basically left high and dry. So this is a potential risk, a very high risk that they're taking, which is why they're charging these weekly interest rates and which is why this loan is expensive. So they're charging interest rates and sometimes additional charges. What can happen is if we don't have in our line item budget a high finance fee or a finance fee that anticipates us having a bridge loan for 8 weeks, which many of us do not do when we put a film budget together. We're not putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest fees because we're hoping everything is going to go well. But in case that happens, they will have us assign a part of our producer fee to get paid. So they will force us to sign a deal with them to say, well, you have producer fees that are issued to you, and if you don't have the money to pay me, the bridge lender, then I'm going to get my hands on your producer fees, and you have to be okay with that. So that's sometimes what happens with bridge lenders. They will recoup from producer fees if there's not enough money available to pay them back. So if they took the money from the finance fees that we have in our budgeted line item, if they took our producer fees and there is still a balance due, that balance would then go into the waterfall and be repaid in the waterfall. So let's look at our equity. We understand that the equity investor has options in working with us. And when we look at the various deals that we can do with them, the first two that we've learned about in our first class and we'll dive into a little more here again is the development deal and the production deal, and they're slightly different. The development deal refers to a finance agreement between a producer and an equity investor, could also be a production company, by the way, to finance the initial stages of a film or a TV project or even a slate, specifically the development phase. So this is the phase where we have our rights acquisition payments, we pay the writer for the screenplay, we pay talent, we pay casting directors, we pay down payments for pay or play offers for talent when we package them. We start putting our locations in line, we pay for budgets and preliminary finance plans, and we pay for distribution related agreements and lawyers, etc. So there's a lot going on in the development phase that is costly. So normally when we look at development in general, this could be about, if you look at the costs in connection to that, it could be between 10 and 20% of your budget, depending on what kind of actors you have, how complex your rights situation is, etc. So this is something that the development investor would look at and help us pay. The terms for the development deal would be 20% on the money, so that's a 20% premium on the investment amount. So we're looking at 20% of whatever they gave us during the development phase. The recoupment for this would be on closing. So similar to the bridge lender we learned about earlier, this investor who gives us development financing would get paid on closing. So when the completion bond is issued and funds are released, the payment to them will be a part of the production cash flow plan that goes to them. So they're not only getting their money back, they're also getting their 20% premium right away. They will have, in addition, a small profit participation. It's usually not that big, but it's small. And they will have a profit participation in royalties for additional IP related content. So it's not just this IP, it could also be related IP, remakes, spin-offs, books, comics, anything that can drive from a movie. So they will have a small participation in that as well. Now the production investor, who will basically do an agreement with us or with our company to fund the production costs, meaning the budget, would have also a 20% premium on the investment that they made. They would, however, recoup in the waterfall, and that includes that premium. The development investor does not recoup in the waterfall. They only recoup in the profit component of the waterfall, and so does the production investor. So they have a profit participation, and they have, of course, royalties for additional IP related content. The profit participation for the production investor is, of course, much higher than what the development investor would get. So if an equity investor gives you, let's say, 50% of the budget, let's just make it simple, they would get 25% profit. So it's 50% of the 50% of the budget that they gave you. So it's always 50% of the investment amount in relation to the budget that they would finance. So if they give you 30% of the budget as a production investment, they would get 15% profit participation. Now these are general industry standard terms, and as I've mentioned many times before in the previous class, the deal can be what the deal is. You have negotiation room, they have negotiation room. So there are no rules set in stone. There are some industry standards that I'm referring to, but there's nothing set in stone on what the development deal or the production deal should entail in regards to terms and conditions. Now the ring fencer deal is something that I came up with in connection with the first fund I structured, the first media fund, because I was the equity investor. I did not want to wait to recoup behind the senior loan, recoup behind the junior loan, recoup behind the sales agent, behind the firms, behind everyone. I'm recouping last. I wanted to do something where I have an exclusive first recoupment corridor position. That can happen when I assign certain territories out of the collateral pool to me as part of the backing for my investment in a film. So that means if I assign, let's say, the territory of Thailand or Israel to me, and they would be assigned to me as value, in connection with what the sales estimates say. So it's not just like willy-nilly. So it would be assigned in saying, well, if you're presenting this much equity and some of that is used to basically kind of purchase but not these small territories, then this portion of the investment would go against the ring fence and the other one would be the equity investment. So basically I would then own these little territories, and when they get sold, I get the money. Basically, of course the sales agent would get their fee, but I get the money right away. So I could actually, in theory, with this ring fencer structure, recoup at the same time than the bank would recoup. Now, this is not something you can do with many banks. A lot of banks will say, I will not have you touch my collateral, stay away from it. But many lenders who do gap loans and pre-sale loans, who do senior loans, in fact, will let me do this. So I have worked with various lenders and media funds who had said, we'll give you the senior loan and we will let you remove some of these territories out of the collateral pool so you can recoup from that. So what this does to an equity investor is it allows them to actually make money pretty early on. And they like that, or everyone likes it. So it instigates trust. They believe they've done a good deal. So if we can get away with few little ring fencer territories, small ones, that the senior lender is not crazy about holding their hands on, this would be a very good structure for us to include as an equity investment option. So as we talked about, equity investors can invest as development or production investors in films and television projects. They do want to see 20% of the equity investment amount as a premium. They do want to see profit participation and ownership in the IP. They want to be part of the royalties and want to make sure that anything in connection with the IP is something that they're going to be a part of. They would ideally have limited approval rights. So if an investor gives you a lot of money, they might say to you, well, if you change something, I want to know about it and I want to approve it, which would make sense. But you should then limit it to only if the change I make as the producer will change the valuation of the project, you would have either meaningful consultation or approval rights. So that's something that you can discuss with them. They would, of course, want to make sure that the chain of title is clear, that we actually own and control the project and the rights. They don't have a term. There is no, normally in these finance agreements, there is no time frame by which we have to pay them back. There's no performance guarantee, so there's no guarantee anywhere that says we're going to pay you back for sure, Mr. Equity Investor. There's no lien per se, even though they are filed with the copyright, but it's not like they can't foreclose on our film. They kind of co-own it with us, but they can't foreclose on it. And of course, we have to be honest, they can lose their capital. It is a situation where equity investors can actually lose their money. So this is something that we need to mitigate when we do our finance plans and risk mitigation strategies. Now, risk mitigation strategies, since we talk about it, would include that we're very feasible with our budgets, specifically in connection with the sales estimates that have been established by a bankable sales agent and someone who has done this kind of movie and sold this kind of movie before. Pre-sales, of course, are important, and they must be bankable. That means that the take estimates are being supported by the pre-sales that were concluded. The loan that we have in front of them, senior loan, and also the junior loan if we have one, they need to be feasible. So if they're too expensive or too, they're too grabby with fees and terms and costs, that would be something that the equity investor would not like, because they would have to pay for that, basically, because all of that is recouping in front of them. They want a balanced finance plan to optimally leverage the investment and therewith optimize profits. They want to have a track record proven team and a commercially viable project. So someone in that pitch deck that you guys are going to put together needs to know how this goes down. So you should always think about having people in your team on your film or TV project that have done things before. Specifically, if you are newer to the industry, if you're a newer producer or newer director, you need to surround yourself with track record proven team members. There will be in the collection agent management agreement in order to see what other deal terms are happening with the other financiers and banks on the film. So this will help them to be transparent, and it would also be for us, everyone is transparent about who is in the film, what are the costs in connection with other financiers, when do they recoup, when does the equity investor recoup. So the CAMA, the collection agent management agreement, will combine all the people that are in the financing and distribution realm, and so this will be a very transparent structure. Most equity investors will require completion bond insurance, but not everyone. And if they don't require completion bond insurance, they do want a feasible contingency in the budget, something where they can say, if things go wrong, there's enough money here to deal with it. We have talked about non-recoupable finance sources at length in our previous course. Let's dive into it a little deeper. We know it is very important to have non-recoupable finance sources in combination with other finance sources in our configuration for a finance plan for a film and television projects, because we need them to be a buffer in case something goes wrong, or if our numbers are a little tight. So it is important for profitability to have non-recoupable finance sources. In addition, it also gives us creative freedom and financial flexibility because there's no obligation to repay these funds from distribution revenue. So this is something that actually helps us creatively as well, because there's no one looking over our shoulder and saying, if you use my money, you got to do this, you got to do that, and you got to re-edit this or re-edit that. None of that, because there's no creative approval component here and no profit component here for these finance sources. Now, these sources include US and international subsidies, incentives, and grants, which are locally driven incentives in the US and in international territories. There is a music investment, which, as we talked about earlier or in the last class, is a pre-buy of music publishing rights. Then we have brand sponsorships, where brands provide sponsorships in return for us using their product on screen in an integrated way. Then there are donations and non-profit contributions, which sometimes, depending on the subject matter of the film or TV show or documentary we're producing, could be very, very feasible for them to give us donations and such, because it's something that potentially works with their message, with their mission. Crowdfunding, we can go Kickstarter, GoFundMe, and other sites in order to get crowdfunding generated for a film. And then there's in-kind services, which are budgeted line items we do not have to pay. So these non-recoupable finance sources help mitigate risk and optimize profits. They are very important for equity investors, and they are very important for our finance plan and our business plan. We have to have them in there in some shape or form. They decrease the burden of repayment, they increase net profits, and they attract funding from equity investors and other financiers, because they know that the profitability of a film or TV project is much increased if we have non-recoupable finance sources in our finance plan. So this is something where we should really think about, what can we do? How can we optimize our production in order to be financially viable with our film project and be less risky, and allow us to do something that we believe in, that we can be creative with, but also we are commercially viable. This is what we can arrange when we have non-recoupable finance sources. There are various incentives and grants that we can get. In general, incentives are provided to film and television content that is produced in a production incentivized region. And it is offered by various states in the US in forms of credits, rebates, or grants. The difference between those is one version of things, like a credit, you have to actually sell to a local company in the region who has a tax burden and will buy this tax credit from you in order to reduce the tax burden. The rebate is something that will go straight to you. You don't have to sell that through a broker or some such. Now, this will only be applicable if you actually produce your movie first and then you go to the film office in the region and say, I produced my movie here, I'm done producing, I spent this money, here are my receipts, and now give me the credit and or rebate. If you do a loan, which is what I always suggest, because you should include this in advance of shooting the movie in the region in your finance plan. So if you get a loan in advance of the production incentive by a production incentive specialized lender, you don't have to worry about the credit or the rebate or the grant version of things, because the incentive lender will take care of all the things that need to be done, selling the credit, dealing with the rebate and grants. You don't have to do that. So that's one advantage. Now, some of the eligible expenses are using above the line components, above the line expenses as eligible expenses, and some will only use below the line. So you're going to have incentive regions that will give you money for above the line and below the line expenses, and you're going to have production regions where it's just the below the line. And that really depends on where you're going and what their requirements are. So if you go to Entertainment Partners website, you'll see there an interactive incentive map that will show you what incentive is applicable in what state and what is the what are the eligibility rules and requirements for you to get money from them. So it's a great website. Entertainment Partners in general, I think, is a great idea to also talk to about, some of the regions you're thinking of shooting in order to access one of these incentives. So you can take the, I would say, opinion letter, let's call it that, from the incentive office to a bank and add this to your loan. So if you have a senior loan, a gap loan, you can get another version, like the third component in your loan, and have them give you the money for the incentive in advance. They do that too. You don't need a specialized incentive lender. You can just go to the bank and have them do it. In that case, however, you are going to be responsible in making sure that, for example, if it's a credit, you find a company you can sell the credit to. If it's a rebate, it's easier, but if there are some limitations on how you can actually use this is going to be up to you to figure out, because the loan is your bank loan. You have to pay this back. So when you use a specialized incentive lender, they do a lot of this heavy lifting. They're a little more expensive than the bank, but they do a lot more work. So it might be worth it for you to consider paying them slightly higher interest rate maybe, and having them do all the organization with the incentive region and with the film office. So incentive lenders and banks will charge an interest rate. They'll charge loan fees and maybe some other costs. I've also sometimes paid executive producer fees and some legal fees to incentive lenders, so that might be applicable too. The incentive that we are using in any location that we are will help us reduce our risk for investors, for producers, reducing financing costs in general, and will optimize the production value and profitability of our film. Now, there is a difference between US and international incentives. International incentives, if we go to another country, can often be subject to treaty co-productions or other local rules and regulations that have to do with what we call a point system. So the more locals you hire, the more points you get. If your writer is European, you get points. If your director is European, you get points. If you have a cast that's European, you get points. If your team is European, you get points. So if your producer is European, your co-producer, obviously they are, because you're going to work with someone who's local, who is a production company in the country that you're going into, because you want their help to access these funds. So the more locals and the more European passports on your team, the more money you can get. They will, for the most part, cash flow these incentives in accordance with the bonded production cash flow plan. So there is not always a need to have an incentive lender or a bank step in to lend this money to you. They will actually really release it to you. Certain grants that they have might be subject to cultural components. So while they give you tax credits, which is a percentage of the budget, which is a percentage of the eligible expenses, they also give you additionally grants that have to do with the cultural components of your story and your film. So you could get more money from them in regards to that. They obviously also support post-production and visual effects. So there are many international countries that will give you quite a lot of money. I've seen it to be up to 50 to 60% of the budget, all of which does not have to be repaid. There are certain grants that may have to be repaid, but they're very limited. And if they are repaid, they're repaid after the equity has recouped, after the premium was paid to the equity investor, and after profits have been paid out to you and to whomever else you will pay profits. So they will be very, 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 very late in the waterfall if a situation like that is contained. So for you to know is that you will need a bankable sales agent, you will need an experienced producer in the country who helps you not just with obtaining these funds, but also running the physical production there, which makes sense because you may not know all the team members and specifics there. So it is good to have a local co-producer. You pay them a little money, but it's absolutely worth it. You want to make sure that the grants that you get and the incentive that you get are also, and you can actually do this, geared toward development and production. They're not just production money. So some of these grants will pay for script development, they'll pay for rights, they'll pay for you putting your script together. So there's not just production funding that you can get, there's also development funding that you can get in many of the international territories. So that's also something where I would suggest go to the website Entertainment Partners, take a look at the world globe picture that they have there, and click on the various countries, and then you see what expenses are eligible that they will accept. Do their finance development and or production, so you can see that there. But you can also call the local film offices and local producers who will gladly help you and advise you to let you know what is best to do in the local country. So when we talk about brand integration, we're not talking about product placement. In fact, brands hate product placement. They don't want to see their product plastered all over the content piece that you're creating, film, TV show, documentary, doesn't matter. They want to see the visual placement done featuring the brand, but within scenes where the placement is done organically. It's used potentially as a verbal placement where the characters mention the brand in some shape or form, but it is always supposed to be used in the plot as a part of it, to be sure that it's authentic and integrated, and it doesn't feel like we're making a 90-minute commercial with Pepsi, for example. We're not doing a commercial. And also, if you do that, it becomes very difficult to sell the show internationally, because specifically European buyers hate it when they watch movies that are plastered with brands all over. So it's a very careful balancing act that you want to do with the brands and their product when you want the financial support of the brands, because the brands, they do want what you want. They want organic integration, they want a positive brand message and positive image for their brand through your story and your character. They want strategic placement with maximum visibility without it being too much. They want creative collaboration with the filmmakers so that we understand as filmmakers what the needs of the brand are, so we can be a little flexible. It's great to work with the brand because promotions and co-branding will give us free advertising to create a buzz around our show or a movie or a TV series. So when they run a commercial with a clip of our show in there, that's great advertising. The brand will want exclusivity in the brand category. So let's say you do a deal with, let's say, a watchmaker. You don't want to have two watches in there, one worn by the main lead, the other one worn by the second lead. So you want to give the brand category exclusivity. That would be important because you can get more money from them for that if you get exclusivity. They want measurable impact with consumer perception and increased sales. So obviously what that means is they want to increase the sale of the product that is in the movie or in the show, and they want the consumer to perceive the product in a way that integrates with the message the brand portrays. They also want to make sure that the movie is not coming out 5 years later when the product's already old and it's already not in the shelves anymore. So the timely delivery to align with the brand marketing of a product is very important. So they want to know when and where is this movie being released. They want us to be flexible and adaptable to align with our interest and theirs, so that we both may need to do adjustments in regards to how a product is integrated to make sure it doesn't, push too hard on the story plot or is too strong visibly in a way that it's not natural anymore. The brand wants us to identify the target audience and our marketing components. So who are we? Who is this movie for? Who is this show for? Is it male, female audience, age groups? They want us to identify that. Now, when we are looking at securing a brand, we want to target a brand that actually does align with the message that we have and makes sense with our characters, our lead characters, to be combined with them. We would identify the marketing team or the ad agency at the brand, and we would likely call both. We want to craft a compelling proposal and pitch materials, and always offer customization to the brand. So if they have ideas that we can include, we should. And of course, we want to negotiate terms that can work for all parties. So we would not do something where they would ask for all kinds of script changes, all kinds of things, and wouldn't pay for that. So we want to make sure that the terms include some kind of payment while we're doing things, and then you can move some of the payment towards the delivery of the movie. The benefits for crowdfunding really, to me personally, is the direct audience engagement. And what we're doing is we're basically creating an early audience. We're creating fans for our film or TV project. That is why I like the idea of crowdfunding through the various internet platforms that support artistic entrepreneurial ventures. So there is there for us to create a buzz around our project when we can create a certain audience and have them engaged in our content. It validates our concept as well. So if we have an idea for a movie and no one really responds to it in the crowdfunding campaign, or even leaves comments that say, that's a weird idea, or that's just, I don't get it, or whatnot, it will help us with fine-tuning our idea on a concept level. The marketing and promotion components are excellent because these crowdfunders, our backers, will be our fans, and they'll talk about what we're doing with our movie, and they'll invite their friends to also give us $5 or something like that. This is obviously an investment that is not to be repaid, so it's non-refundable. There are reward-based crowdfundings that are backers that contribute money in exchange for a perk or a merchandising item or some kind of reward. Those are, for example, Kickstarter and Indiegogo. There are equity crowdfunding options where the backers receive a stake in the company or the project in exchange for their financial contribution. As an example, there would be Seed Invest and Crowdcube that are sites like that. There are donation-based crowdfunding companies that offer funding without, of course, offering anything in return, but really want to support our message, which would be, for example, GoFundMe or Just Giving. And there are actually debt crowdfunding components we can tap into, which is referred to as peer-to-peer lending. And that is something done by Lending Club and Prosper. So there are various crowdfunding opportunities that we can tap into in order to get funds that do, for the most part, not have to be repaid. And of course, there is music investment, where we have a music investment fund that would acquire music publishing rights from us for musical compositions that we're putting in a movie or film projects or television projects. We would then also be able to use them to obtain certain licenses for films that we don't own or we don't produce, but we would like to license for the films. So sometimes music investment companies can help with getting permissions from music publishers and copyright holders to use known songs. They can also be helpful with the clearing from movie. They can facilitate the clearance for the music so that we can use it in our film or TV show, and they can get us rights and permissions for that. The royalty advance payment that they're giving us is basically the music investment. So what they do is they think about how much money can be, they estimate how much money can be made with the music in our film, and they will give us, or TV show, and they will give us an advance payment to basically pre-buy our music publishing rights. And then they help navigate these rights issues, because music publishing companies and licensing deals, as well as original composition or pre-existing tracks, all of those might have different rights components to them. And music investment companies and their teams will help in navigating a complex rights situation with music and helping us clear it and get it ready so that there's not going to be an issue. So this is actually something where we can actually benefit from their expertise. The way they work on their end is they actually have a fund. So they raise capital from institutional investors, from high net worth individuals, or for any other entity that is interested in the entertainment industry and is interested in giving them money to buy, basically pre-buy music publishing rights. So they will do a deal with these investment groups and raising capital to then do a deal with the producer to get either a percentage of our publishing rights or all of the publishing rights. Sometimes what they do is they do a revenue share agreement where they say, we'll give you some money, we're not giving you that much, but when we administer the publishing rights and make money, we'll be happy to share the publishing revenues with you. So they do that too. And the way they would apply due diligence is that they evaluate actually the film's script, talk to the director about music, what kind of music are you planning, and are you looking to hire a track record proven composer or producer to make music producer, that is, to make this music interesting enough and so that we the music investment company can sell it properly. So they're looking at the team and they're looking at the film's vision that is portrayed by the director to make sure that it's a film that they want to support, that they believe it's a film that can be commercially viable, and they want to see it being properly distributed. So they will look at who is the sales agent, what are the sales estimates, are there any pre-sales, because they want to make sure this is a commercially viable project. So then they will let us do the scoring and or producing of songs for the movie, and they will then take the rights to the music that was generated with the film and will place it wherever they feel they can make money with it. And from that point of view, they will generate music publishing rights revenues through music royalties in order to pay not only their investment back but also make money. So what it does in the end, it basically creates a catalog for them. So they have a catalog of musical compositions that they can then also license out. So we could find that our song that we produced for our movie is all of a sudden used in a Pepsi commercial or used in another movie. So they're not just taking our songs to then pre-buy the music publishing revenues that will be generated through the exploitation of the film. They also use the catalog approach by holding our music in the catalog and then license the catalog, and then they can also monetize that catalog by selling the catalog. It's like owning film rights, just in form of music rights. So it becomes a library, and that library has value to them, and that's how they exploit their value optimally. So we've of course talked in our first course about the various finance structures that are available today, and we're going to sum it up here. We have the finance option to use equity, debt, which includes pre-sale, gap, and mezzanine loans, incentives, crowdfunding and in-kind services, music investments, brand sponsorship, and slate financing. We're going to dive into slate financing in a later module, but that is something where a finance structure can get very interesting in regards to optimizing profits. Now the the equity investment options have to do with the fact that equity investors sometimes do want to see a variety of funding methods. Sorry, I just had to take a little water here. In order to optimize their own structure and purpose of the investment to suit them best. So they're looking at not only what stage is the film in and what is the financing structure and what is the financing plan and is it balanced, Or am I, just financing in production or development, or am I financing in distribution, which would be P&A? They look at all the different things and they do a risk analysis for each sector to then decide, how do I want to invest? Not just that, they also look at how can I invest in different forms of finance elements or finance structures. So here we have a landscape that I designed that will help them to offset potential losses, because some of these finance structures that we have put together here will recoup in first position. So that would mean they're not losing their entire capital. They might, lose some of the equity portion, but not all of it. So when the equity becomes gap, they're basically looking at an investment that is very short term. We're talking 1, 2, maybe 3 years until they get money back. Meanwhile, they get paid a dividend or interest. They get paid something every year or in advance for this money right away. So not only is it short term, it recoups in first position as well, and it generates money while it's doing what it's doing. So that's a very early exclusive recoupment corridor that equity might like, because it means that they don't have to wait last in line for everyone to get paid and then they get paid. Also, this gap portion would allow the equity investor theoretically to file a lien against the film, which they cannot do as just pure equity. But if they become a gap lender, in so many words, if they give us money as some kind of a loan structure, they can say, I want to file a lien against this IP to make sure I get paid. So if something goes wrong with the loan, they actually have a movie. They have the movie in hand entirely, and they would own it by themselves. For us, it is really not a big difference if it's an investor that gives us the money or if it's the bank that gives us the money, because they both would file a lien regardless. Now, if the equity becomes mezzanine, which also happens sometimes, it basically happens when an equity lender says there's too many people in the equity pool, as I mentioned earlier, or there's not enough collateral for me, the equity investor, to recoup from. I want to be a mezzanine lender. I want to recoup earlier. So the term here is a medium term. This could be 2 to 3 to 4, maybe 5 years. The interest rate is higher, meaning they make more money with their money. They do recoup before the equity, so they are outside the equity pool in an exclusive recoupment position, and they can also here file a lien. So if the mezzanine loan is not repaid in full, they can actually file a lien against the film and then own it. Both of these would not be possible with just an equity investment. The ring fencer territories we talked about earlier is where they would have defined territories bought out. So they buy out certain countries, certain territories where they just own them, and then they own an exclusive first recoupment position for this territory. So it's basically as if they would own the country of Italy. Italy would be a big territory, so that would probably not apply here. But let's say Turkey, right? They say, I want to have the Turkish rights. I want to have them exclusively. I buy them. Here is what I pay for them. It's a part of the equity investment that I'm making. And then they own the territory. And if that territory gets sold to a Turkish buyer, they make money in first position from these revenues. And then when we do P&A, as we mentioned earlier, it's last money in, first money out. They basically recoup in first position from box office revenues, which is also great. So they come in late, movie's already finished, they're just financing the P&A, then the movie gets released. So theoretically, they could be making money in just months. A combination of these structures can be seen. Theoretically, they could do all those things in one film if they wanted to offset the risks. I've never really seen it all in one film, but maybe we'll do a case study where we do it just for funsies. But this is where equity investors can be attracted to a project if you offer them these particular investment options and say, if you don't want equity, or if you want to mitigate the investment risk by applying a different finance structure, here is what I can offer you today to mitigate your risk of losing your capital and to help you optimize revenues and optimize your recoupment position. So this is our summary for our first week, where we're recapping a lot of the finance elements and finance sources that we've learned about in our first course, Entertainment Finance Today, from first dollar to profit distribution. And as you read through the module materials, which I kindly ask you to do, there is a lot more detail there for you to dive into. These are the essentials I want you to remember. These are the essentials I want you to know how to apply, and especially read the case studies and watch the case study videos so that you can do the quizzes and assignments. Those are in the modules as well. I have not summarized them here, but you have videos for those as well in the modules. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me via the Canvas inbox, and I usually get back within 24 hours. And if we need to, we can always set a one-on-one. I will always offer office hours on the weekends so that we can sit together on a Saturday afternoon online and discuss anything that is not clear to you. So always feel free to reach out. This is it for week 1. I hope you had fun with the materials this week, and looking forward to seeing you again in module 2.